Welcome to the Descenso Zone podcast, where we talk about creativity and personal growth through a lens of curiosity and humor. My guest today has a master's in psychiatric neuroscience and also happens to be an award-winning writer and producer who's written over 100 episodes of television on shows like The Magic School Bus Rides Again, Insepctor Gadget, The Cat in the Hat, and he also created the original series Goldie's Oldies. We talk about his path and journey in the industry, the art of show-running original series, the business of rebooting old ones, and much more. Now, let's get into the zone with Thaler Hickey. Thaler Hickey, thank you so much for being here. I'm so stoked to talk to you. It's great to see you again.
Mike Descenso, I am so pleased to be here in the Mike Descenso zone.
Thank you. Well, it's great to have you. And you're just such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to writing and producing and a million other things. So I'm just excited to have you on and talk to you. But Evan, one of the first things I want to ask you about, you have a master's degree in psychiatric neuroscience.
I do.
And you're a television writer and producer. How did we get here?
That is such a good question, Mike. So I mean, like I've always been sort of like, I guess, like left brain, right brain, or whatever, whatever way you want to kind of describe that. Like in like high school and stuff, it was always like I was in the high school band and I was in the plays, but also like really into science. And then when I did my undergraduate at Mount Allison University, shout out Mount A, I did it in biology and Brahma. And so it was one of those things where it was always these two things together. And even though the drama stuff was really my passion, it was like kind of, I don't know if people still say this today, where it's like, well, friends don't let friends take arts. And, you can't make a living in the arts and all that kind of thing. I think people still do say that, including our premier. But the kind of upshot of everything was that I decided, okay, when I got to my fourth year, I could either do the drama thing full time, or I could do the science thing full time, which seems like probably the safer option. But maybe I will go and become a professor, and because I'm like I was good at school. And it's like, and I enjoyed the academic environment of the small liberal arts college that I was at. And it was something that seemed like a viable plan. And I have like academics in my family and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, maybe this is the way to go. So I was really into studying the effects of drugs on the brain in my undergrad, and I decided to do that as a degree.
Let's be clear. Let's time out. Let's be clear about that. Does that mean theoretically studying the effects in like a petri dish, or does that mean some teenage or sort of 20s
teenage
experimentation?
Yeah, there was a nice little underground scene, like underground party scene out east, and it was a really enjoyable time and scene at the time.
So that fascinated you, and you wanted to learn more about the effects of that from a scientific level as well?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I applied to McGill and got in there, and my thesis. So my degree is technically in neurophysiological psychopharmacology, which is the study of drugs' effects on the brain. And I was looking at nicotine as a potential therapeutic for the early stages of Alzheimer's. And the idea in my mind was that I would, start working in the sort of the nicotine thing. I might go do a second master's in ethnobotany, which is the study of how different cultures use medicinal plants, and then kind of put those two things together and kind of do a PhD and things like that. And while I was doing my lab work, I got really depressed. I found it really isolating. Um, the grad work was it wasn't the grad community and the grad work that I was doing. It wasn't like the community and the work that I'd been doing in my undergrad. Um, and I just felt really isolated. I was just feeling very isolated and kind of down on the academy. And I realized like, okay, this is not maybe what I want to do. And at the same time, where my thesis advisory committee was like, well, why don't you just roll directly from the master's into the PhD? And you'll knock a year off of the PhD, and you can just keep going. And I really had a deep think about that, and I was like, I don't think I could do that anymore. Um, I don't think that it's, I don't think I'd be, true to myself or, whatever. Um, and so one day I was in my lab and I was thinking like, oh man, like, what am I going to do with my life? What is it that I am passionate about? And it sort of like, it just like hit me. Like if it was a religious thing, I'd be like, I'm going to be a rabbi now. But like, it was very much like, the thing that I'm passionate about is television and film. I want to be a TV and film producer. And I had no idea what a producer did, but that seemed like the thing that I wanted to do. What I realize now in hindsight is what I wanted to be was a showrunner, but I did not have that language at the time.
So much to unpack there. I want to
Yeah.
step back before you keep going forward into the
Hmm.
into the journey. First of all, thank you so much for admitting that you were depressed at one point in your life, because all of us have been, but it's something that very few people are willing to talk about. So I appreciate you saying that. And especially as someone who's studying psychology at the time, that's like
Hmm.
a sort of a meta thing where you can almost like, were you self-aware of it? And were you aware of even like the chemical level of processing that was happening at the time? Like, did you actively think like, hey, this is like a chemical reaction that's going on because I've studied this and I know about it, and this is how I need to mitigate it? Or were you just so in it that you weren't like cognizant of that, I guess?
It was a combination of the two. It was the sort of like self-diagnosing and being like, I think I'm really depressed. Also, I'm anxious all the time. Kind of thing. And being like, well, what does that mean?
Hmm.
And uh and then also the sort of malaise of just what depression does, just tamps everything down and makes it hard to move. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
So you were feeling that and you realized, okay, something needs to change here.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And to my parents' credit, when I told them like, hey, I don't want to pursue the sciences anymore. In fact, what I want to do is television and film.
Uh-huh.
But don't worry, like I'm going to finish out the masters. I still had a year left, and I was no, I didn't come this far only to get this far, kind of thing. And um, so I did that, and that was great. Like I'm so glad that I have this kind of party trick that I can pull out every now and again, being like, hey, look at me, I've got a master's in neuroscience. But also, it has helped me get jobs when people are like, oh, we've got this sciencey type show. Oh, Evan's got a science background. We should maybe get him on the show. But it also, in writing my thesis, put me in a writing um, routine. And so when I finished writing my thesis and got that in, I had been writing it for like, I don't know, 5 months or something like that. And was just very much in a writing routine, but this very, very dry science writing routine. And I decided that I needed to write something creative to help just get those creative juices flowing again. And my sister was doing some acting at the time, and she had been sent a script for a show that she was auditioning for, a 1 hour sort of dramedy. And I asked her if I could look at it, and I kind of broke it down. And I was just like, oh, so this is how a script is supposed to look. This is okay, and this is how it's set up. And the science brain kind of glommed immediately onto that and began dissecting it. And then I just sort of started writing my own things. And so I'd been at McGill to finish the thesis and everything. Once my like apartment lease was up, I moved back to Antigonish, Nova Scotia, where I'm from, represent the East Coast. And I was in Antigonish for a little bit. Then I went to Halifax. They had a great filmmakers co-op there, and you could take courses. And if you completed enough of the courses, you could start working on short films that they were doing. And so I started doing that, and then kind of linked up with one of the coordinators there, production managers, producers, and started doing music videos that were in Halifax. And at that time, I thought what I wanted to be was I wanted to go the assistant director route, to learn how to run a floor. And, a second AD knows all of the paperwork for set, and then become a producer off of that. So a producer who knows how to run a floor was what I wanted to do. So again, showrunner is kind of all, revolving around here. But again, I didn't have those words yet, and I was still writing.
So, and sorry, just to interrupt you, just because for anyone who might also not have the words, an AD is an assistant director. There's
Right.
multiple different assistant directors on a set. There's a first AD, second AD, third AD, fourth AD, and then I think either a second, fourth they call it, or there's some weird name for the other
Yeah,
AD.
a TAD,
A
a
TAD.
trainee, a trainee assistant director.
Right.
Yeah.
And so essentially the ADs are sort of helping run the production on the day-to-day basis when we're filming. So different ADs have different jobs. So that's sort of just a quick overview of what an AD is.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, just in case anyone is listening and is like, what's an AD? And even a showrunner, maybe you can explain sort of because showrunner is a nebulous title.
A nebulous term.
Quite exist when you see the credits go rolling by. So maybe you can explain what a showrunner is as well.
Absolutely. So a showrunner is if the show is a company, the showrunner is the CEO of that company. So you are the chief creative officer and the chief executive officer of that show. You are the person with whom the buck stops. You make the big decisions. You generally have final edit on things. The Writers Guild of Canada, of which we are both parts, says that the showrunner should be a writer's position, which I also believe. So it is, somebody who's the head writer's boss, who's also the writer, kind of thing, and also doing the editing, and is sort of looking over the director's shoulder every now and again and prompting little things here and there, and doing, the final scene casting, and the person that the people run to, Red Sox or Blue Sox, and you're like, Red Sox, kind of thing. Like, that's the showrunner. You run the show. And boy, oh boy, what a heady experience.
Yeah, you really have your hands in all pieces of the production. So it's a really, really interesting role, and which you've done. So I'd love to talk about that, but I want to get back to where we were. So we took this little detour to get into some of the terms, but you were becoming more interested in writing and production, and you thought you would go the AD route. What happened? What was the next steps for you?
So what's interesting is that I'm glad that we kind of broke out the levels of ADs, and so I realized that Halifax, where I was at that point, had a really big film and TV boom in like the 90s, and that kind of dried up. But what it meant was that there were a lot of people on the union roster who, would get calls before you would ever get a call. And I kind of did the math and I realized that like three big shows would have to come to Halifax all at the same time for me to like be a trainee assistant director on one of them. And that just wasn't going to happen. And at the same time, a couple of friends of mine were like, "Hey, we just, we're getting a place in Toronto. We're renting a house. You want to come?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go." And so moved out to Toronto, and I've been here ever since, almost 22 years, which is crazy. And then I started working on short films here almost immediately. And that was when I had a pretty big revelation. So I was working on a short film here in the first month that I was in Toronto. And on the very last day, the third AD, who is the first AD's assistant on set, you know, um, couldn't show up. They had a conflict. And they were like, "Oh, okay, well, put Evan in." He said, he hopes to be an AD someday. And I was so thrilled. Here's my moment. And I'm finally be an AD. And ADs, a lot of production staff have walkies, headsets, right? So they've got the walkie with the 1 ear headset, so that they can listen to the walkie chatter and what's going on around, and they know what's going on. And I put on the headset and realized that I was never going to be an AD because I am deaf in my right ear. And the moment I put on that headset, the world around me went away, and all I was hearing was walkie chatter. And so I spent the whole day sort of doing, doing this, and it was miserable, and like, could barely move my shoulder when I left set at the end of that, 18-hour day or whatever. And I was like, okay, this is not happening. I'm not going to be an AD. Like, that's just not going to be it. So I decided I would go the production management route instead, which is the next chapter. So if you have any questions, you want to like.
Well, no, but not okay. Lucky is the wrong word, but it's good that that didn't work out, because then you found sort of your calling through this other path. So, sometimes things that don't work out can lead you to the next thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It put me out of my comfort zone, really.
There we go. Hey, you're jumping the gun. You're jumping the gun.
Sorry. So I started coordinating, production managing on short films around town, and kind of hooked up with a group of production people that were they would move from spot to spot, and I kept writing the whole time, and they all knew that I was writing as well. And so people were like, "Oh, well, you want to be a writer because you're writing." And I was like, "Well, I mean, that would be nice, but like, this is what I do." And my writing got a little bit of notice, and I ended up getting an agent because of it. But still, I wasn't booking gigs or freelance shows. I was still working in the production world. And it wasn't until I was a segment producer on a cross Canada reality road trip web series, and which was a really cool experience. We drove from like Halifax to Vancouver over a period of time, and it was a soft sell for the Nissan Versa that was just about to come out, and the winner of this reality show would get their very own Nissan Versa. And so at the end, myself and the rest of the production crew were sitting around in a bar in Vancouver and like, what do you got going on next? And I was like, oh, I'm, production managing a couple of things for the Canadian Film Center, but like that's sort of it. And one of the people there was like, well, you want to be a writer, right? And I was like, well, it'd be nice, but well, she said, okay, I know that this isn't writing, but it's writing adjacent. I happen to know a couple of showrunners who are looking for an executive assistant. Maybe that might be a way to help get your foot in the door. They're kids showrunners, um, but and I was like, hey, that I'll take that. So I went and I interviewed for the job and I got it and I became the executive assistant of two people, John May and Suzanne Balch, who quite well, and because they were the showrunners on Naturally Sadie.
That's right. Yes,
So
they were Naturally Sadie season one.
yeah,
John May and Suzanne were show running, and they were fantastic. And we'd kept in touch after as well. When I transitioned into writing, they were some of the first calls I made because I was like, "What do I do?"
yeah,
And they were fantastic. So yeah, it's a small world. There's so many little
it's a very
connections like
small
that.
world. Yeah, so I was really lucky, and I was their exec assistant for a couple of years. Then they had two shows that had been in development kind of go at the same time. One called Connor Undercover, and the other one called How to Be Indie. And they brought me on as their script coordinator, and sort of writer's assistant, and junior writer on the shows. And that's how I got my union card. And those were the first shows that I worked on. And it felt good. It felt really good to write.
Yeah, I, I
Yeah.
I can imagine. Was it intimidating at all being in the writing room for that first time? I know for me it was.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying because also, John can be a big personality, and and it was a first time thing, and it was my first time like script coordinating and all of these things, just really, it was really wild. But I found I really loved writing, and I really, really loved writing on a deadline.
Yes,
That
that's a good distinction because writing on a deadline is different from just having freedom to write because,
so
it's you'll
true.
never finish anything. At least in my experience. I'm sure there's
Mhm.
some dedicated people who can, but it's for me much harder. I just want to pause quickly and
Mhm.
talk a little bit. We've talked about it on the podcast before, just because I have so much experience doing it. But
Yeah,
script coordinating, for anyone who doesn't know, is sort of a assistant kind of level junior writer type role. You know that this person wants to be a writer, but they're sort of helping with some of the administrative work of show running a television show, things like helping with revisions, taking notes, doing getting notes from the network, liaising between production network and the writers, sort of organizing the writing
distribution.
room, distribution, yes, to script
Mhm.
distribution, revision distribution, all kinds of the administrative work of like the writing room. But then also they get to like be in the room, absorb all of the creative that's happening. If you have a cool boss, they'll let you like pitch ideas from time to
Mhm.
time. And the idea is hopefully you get to eventually write or co-write an episode. And that's been the case for me. I've written many episodes now, having from that script coordinator position, and that is definitely a way in for anyone who's like thinking about doing it.
It's a
Um,
great way in.
yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
feels like less so now, and we can maybe talk about the
Yes.
landscape now as well.
Let's.
But
Mhm.
but I do want to finish with this story. So okay, so you've got some script coordinating under your belt. You've got your first few scripts, and you just sort of continue down that track and continue as a writer and become like an exec producer and so on. Or
Almost. There
almost
is
okay.
there is a little sort of like little curlicue
Uh-huh.
that happens, which is as you're well aware, production can be pretty punishing and eat up your life. And I was rolling directly from one show onto another. In fact, there were a couple of weeks of overlap where I was coordinating on two shows. So when How to Be Indie season one finished, I had been in production, constant production for, I don't know, 9, 10 months or something. It was a long time, of like, 14-hour days and all that kind of stuff. And a really good friend of mine was getting married in Japan. And I thought, well, Connor Undercover is coming back in mid-July. It's, towards the end of May right now. I'm going to go to Japan for basically that period of time. I'm going to go to my buddy's wedding. I'm going to have a great time in Japan, hang out with friends who are also going to the wedding. We're gonna have a blast. And I did. And it was great. When I got back, I was like, okay, let's go. Connor Undercover season 2. And they were like, oh, hey, so it got pushed 6 months. It's not going to be happening until December. And I went, I just spent all my money in Japan. So let this be a lesson to all freelancers. Save some money. And it was a very good lesson at that time. I was very lucky in that, just at that moment, Shaftesbury Films, who was the co-producer of Connor Undercover, reached out to me and they said, hey, you may have heard Connor Undercover has been pushed 6 months, but we're thinking about opening a production executive, development executive role here at Shaftesbury Kids. Would you be interested in applying? We think you'd be very good for it. And I was like, yes, because I have no money. And so I went and I applied and I got the job. And so one of those very strange things where I went from being the story coordinator, junior writer on Connor Undercover to being a production executive on it, which was really
Crazy.
odd.
Like that is
Odd.
that is
Yeah,
crazy that happened.
crazy.
And you account it to luck, but I refuse to believe that. There's no way it was luck, because that doesn't happen. Like, especially when you're a script coordinator with, limited experience and like a couple of scripts under your belt, you don't just go to become a development executive. That's quite a leap. And for anyone who doesn't know, like a development executive is sort of a pretty high tiered position within a production company, where you are sort of helping to craft and shape and nurture shows
Yeah.
that will then get pitched to networks or streamers or whomever, and eventually, ideally, sold. So you're really it's quite a creative job, but it's also you're a curator of ideas in a
Yeah,
lot of
very
ways,
much a curator is and a shepherd
and a
is the
shepherd.
way
Yeah.
that, yeah, you're being a development executive, I think is very much kind of like being a shepherd or like a midwife. You're trying to, it's not your child, but you are so invested and you are trying to help this beautiful thing be born and go out into the world. And it can be a really heartbreaking um, position as well, because, of course, a lot of projects don't ever make it or get very close and then don't, or the beautiful thing about them gets trampled on because, well, if we just do this, then maybe, because a broadcaster said that they wanted koala bears instead of it being
A kid.
cats. Yeah, a
Yeah.
kid. Yeah,
You're right.
those things. And so, long story made slightly longer. I was at Shaftesbury for a couple of years. Still writing. I wrote on Connor Undercover, season 2. Wrote a couple of web things for Shaftesbury. And then I was like, okay, it is time for me to either be an executive or be a writer. And I decided that I was going to be a writer, and Shaftesbury Kids was also kind of closing down unbeknownst to me at the time. And so they were kind of like, you should probably leave. And I was like, okay. Uh, and
And then you went to Japan again. No.
no, I went to Italy. But I saved some money this time. And also I I was starting to put myself out there as a writer again, and another executive friend of mine, Julianne Rainseth, who was at a company called Nerdcore at the time, was like, "I'm leaving Nerdcore," or sorry, she was at Cookie Jar rather. She's like, "I'm leaving Cookie Jar for Nerdcore. I have a bunch of projects that are very close to getting finished. I need somebody to take them over the line. Could you please go in and interview for the job? Because I trust that you could do that. Um, I know you want to be a writer, but you know, we're talking like 8 months max." And I was like, okay. Um, I had not really done animation before. And that's what Cookie Jar was known for, was animation. Um, and so I went in and interviewed, and I got the job, and I took over her slate. At the same time, Cookie Jar was being bought by a company called DHX, which is now called Wild Brain, and and so I kind of was able to see what like a big corporate takeover also looked like from the inside, not worrying about my job because like I'm on contract. Um, but the long and the short of that is that I got to help get a couple of really cool shows over the line, like the reboot of Inspector Gadget. And uh, and then when I came out the other side of that, they were like, "Well, you've been working on all of these shows as a development executive, and you want to be a writer. So why don't you just go write on these shows?" And I was like, "I don't think the head writers would be very happy about that." And they're like, "Don't worry about it." And some head writers were not very happy about, oh, look, the suit wants to
Mm,
be a writer.
right.
And I got some guff from some of them. But I'm really happy to say that the people who gave me the most amount of pushback became my biggest boosters ultimately, and I'm still really good friends with today. And that's what got me in the animation side of writing, because that's kind of primarily what I'm known for now is animation. And had I not done that stint as the director of development at Cookie Jar and DHX, working only on animated property, and I don't know that I would have ever gone the animation route. And I'm so glad that I did, because when I started writing way back when I was like, oh, I'm going to write things like, that aren't my thesis, the stuff that I wanted to write was genre stuff. Because I wanted to write, horror and sci-fi and fantasy and like magic realism, like that's supernatural stuff. Like that's what I wanted to do. And then I became a kids writer, and I realized, oh my God, that's what I get to do every day, but with jokes. Because like, what is like, Camp Lake Bottom but horror, a camp horror but with jokes. And Inspector Gadget is, a cyberpunk procedural with jokes. And
Right.
Magic School Bus is one heck of a trip with science and jokes. And it's everything. I get to write superhero stuff. I get to write, just like so many really cool things and touch these properties that had a huge impact on me as a kid. Gadget and Magic School Bus sort of being the kind of notable ones. Um, but I get to do it by also being funny. And that is just kind of the best job ever.
I mean, we're biased, but I
Hmm.
agree. I think
Yeah.
it is the best job ever. And just to make a small personal connection, I know we've talked about this outside of the podcast, but uh, just goes to show how small of a world it was. Just I think as you were
Yeah.
leaving Cookie
Mm.
Jar
Yeah.
and
Literally.
VHX,
Yeah.
I came in and started to work in development there as
Yeah.
well. So it was really interesting how those worlds collide. And I really love to hear that your story contains development and writing, because I feel like, and I know you got guff the other way for going from development to writing, but I also feel like there's not enough credit given for writers who want to go into development, because
Mm.
they didn't go through the corporate, they don't have 9 years of corporate sitting in an office, but they have story experience, and I think that's really valuable for a development exec to understand. And so I think it can go both ways. I think a good writer can be a good development exec, and vice versa. Of
Yeah.
course, not everyone, but some people are more suited for certain things. But I think it can go both ways.
I think having that sense of story is so important. But I think that the big thing about being a development executive, I think that this extends to being, a broadcast or streaming executive as well, is that kind of midwife analogy.
Mhm.
Because I have run across not an insignificant number of broadcast execs in my career, or development execs in my career, who, rather than being the midwife, suddenly want to be the pregnant woman
Right.
and the mom. And well, not even they don't want to be the pregnant woman, they want to be the mom. And they're just like, they're right in there and just like really messing with the kid,
Yes.
and being like, no, 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 it doesn't matter that you've carried this child. You're just the surrogate.
Right.
This is, have we taken this analogy far enough?
And then I think it needs to go further, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so i I think part of a really good development executive, broadcast executive, is knowing that you have to put some ego aside,
Yeah.
um, and that you're not the head writer.
That's a really
And
good
that,
point.
yeah,
You're shepherding a vision. You're not sort of creating the vision or leading the vision.
hmm
You're sort of there to support and help and give notes and stuff, but also
yeah,
and to some extent shape, but really not. You don't want to get too far away from the original vision if you can avoid it, I
yeah,
think.
exactly.
So you've written now over 100 episodes of television. Um,
Easily now, yeah, it's probably poking up and getting closer to 200
oh
now, maybe
wow,
even, right?
amazing!
Maybe not that much. It can't possibly be that much. Maybe
It's
like 150.
still it's
Yeah.
it's very like prolific and quite a feat. And I'm curious, if I sat down and watched every single one of your episodes of every show that you've ever written back to back, what
That's a
is there
challenge.
is there any Evanisms, that like a through line of Evanisms, that just like I would be like, that's an Evan episode. Like anything come to mind that you just always try and sneak in or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I really like I try to put a fair amount of heart into my episodes, and not in an earnest way, but I really like a good tight character story. That which is I wrote an episode of Paw Patrol, and that was the trickiest thing, was trying to get a little bit of character in there, because that show is actually very plot structured. It is kind of the thing that we're told not to do, but it is maybe the exception to the rule, because it is such a juggernaut. Um, but the yeah, and like little, there might be a little, maybe probably too clever science joke, or a too clever literary reference in there, a blink and you'll miss it pop culture reference that a parent might, go like, that I've managed to get through all of the layers of people, but nothing current pop culture. So nothing that would be like a flash in the pan kind of thing, more referencing a 1970s sci-fi title or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
It's putting those little tidbits in for the adults who are in the room but not really listening, and then they can kind of go, what did
yeah,
you say?
there was an episode of a series that I wrote, which was the Bagel and Becky show, and Kevin McDonald from Kids in the Hall played the voice of Bagel, who was a dog, and at one point, a cat. In one of my episodes, a cat jumps on his head, and I have him run around screaming, "Cat on my head, cat on my head, cat on my head," which is a reference to Kids in the Hall brain candy, um, which happens in there. But and it's like those kinds of things. It has to fit anything that gets used has to work on the level of the story itself too. I'm not just trying to, stick,
For
uh,
sure. And that's a very
stick things
sneaky
in there.
joke because,
Mm.
it's someone doing a quick read of that might not, like a development exec or a network person might not like catch what's happening
Yeah,
there. So it's a very clever, sneaky joke.
it's also like very funny on screen because you do have a dog running around with a cat, like trying to burrow in
Right.
on his head, screaming, "Cat on my head, cat on my head, cat on my head."
So it works
Um,
on
so it
multiple
works on all the
levels.
levels. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
You touched on your time sort of doing some development work and Inspector Gadget specifically. So Inspector Gadget is a show that they've rebooted, and you're sort of on the team to
Mhm.
help shape the reboot, and then you ended up writing for it as well. Like, do you feel a sense of pressure or concern when you have like this existing intellectual property that's so beloved, and you have to like make it feel nostalgic but also different from the original? And like, how do you navigate working on a show that is being like redone?
Yeah, it's a real tight wire act, and a real tripwire act. It's one of the reasons why I don't think that the constant rebooting of IP works um, particularly well. And it is because you have a property that's usually, had its heyday, and people have moved on from it. And it's like, okay, this was really popular back then. We are going to reboot it. And we're going to reboot it for today and today's sensibilities. And oftentimes, today's sensibilities and the sensibilities of, say, the 1980s or even the 1990s don't particularly match up. But you've got this group of people who own the IP, who are like, this is so precious to us. It has to be that show. And you go, well, that show doesn't work anymore. Something like Inspector Gadget, for instance, where it's like, okay, old white man bumbles around, takes credit for all of the things that his young niece does, and gets all of the accolades. The end. So it's not a great look, but that is kind of the DNA of the show. And so you end up with this real push-pull between the person or people or company that holds the rights who say this cannot change because it was perfect and did great way back when, and the production company and broadcasters who are like, yeah, we are going to make this, edgy and new for the new generation. And then with kids television specifically, you're taking this thing where you're doing that big push pull and probably not getting the best version of what that could be. And then saying to children, hey, kids, this thing that you have no connection with anyway, but your parents might go like, "Oh yeah, I remember that here," and they go, "Huh? This isn't connecting with me because it's not. This doesn't feel like what I want to watch because it feels like something that was put together by committee, which, or compromise. It I feel like most IP ends up being compromise. And compromise is kind of the death of art and the death of craft.
And yet
Um,
so many shows are rebooted. I mean,
yeah.
just the few on your resume: Magic School Bus, Inspector
Hmm.
Gadget, Cat in the Hat. Like,
Hmm.
what is the appeal? Is it just that this is an existing property, we know people are going to watch it because it has a brand recognition, and is that the whole driving factor behind rebooting these things over and over again?
I mean, that's definitely the short answer
Yeah.
is brand recognition. I mean, I could go on a whole late stage capitalism rant right now, where, really the problem is these companies that are beholden to shareholders and not to the thing that they're actually supposed to make, because there are two different economies. It is the economy of things that actually get made, and there's the stock market. And these companies that should be making things are really more beholden to their stock price. And so they go to the shareholders, investors call and they say, "Hey, guess what? We're going to reboot Inspector Gadget." And people go, "Oh, Inspector Gadget? We know Inspector Gadget. Great. Approved. Share price up 2% because, oh my gosh, Inspector Gadget, and it's in all the trades. And look, they're going to do Inspector Gadget. Who's reading the trades? It's the adults, and they're so excited because it's Inspector Gadget. And, the price is up even more now. And isn't that great?" And then you have the thing that goes out, and the kids, I genuinely don't know the numbers. But, I mean, we did 2 seasons of it, which is fine.
Better
Um,
than a lot of shows
yep, better than
these
a lot of
days.
things. Um, but, it's not one of the shows that people. It's my cocktail party show for adults. It's not the thing when I go in and talk to like high school students that they're like, "Oh my God, Inspector Gadget." They're like, "Oh my God, Connor and Cover and How to Be Indie or the Bagel and Becky Show," and like things that had real, points of view. Um, but not to say that Gadget didn't have a point of view, but it's it's different. It's fundamentally different. And yeah, it really is for those earning calls, to make shareholders feel secure that there is something that they know that's coming down the pipe. It doesn't matter about the audience. It matters about the shareholders. And then, of course, things will go badly. Maybe an IP like, say, Masters of the Universe will tank, or Moana live action will tank, and or Grogu and Mandalorian will tank, and uh, or Supergirl will tank. I could keep going, and that's just this year. And we're not done this year, but um, those things don't work, and then people lose their jobs, and then new people come in and they clear the decks and they say, "Hey, you know what? We need to fire people because that's going to be the quickest way for us to increase our valuation again. We should not make these things. We should concentrate more on IP. Obviously, we didn't do it properly, but we'll do it right. No original stuff. That's scary to the shareholders. We need a bigger IP. We need something more massive. You know, get me Calvin and Hobbes, and it's like that, which will never happen, which is why I use that as an example.
Well, but
Um,
that's so telling though of like the mindset and the psychology around why these shows are getting made. I mean, we've seen 1 million Spider-Mans and they keep bringing in money, and
mhm,
so that's just a cash cow for them. It's not. I mean, and look, I like some of those Spider-Man movies, but
mhm,
there, but at some point there's like fatigue of like, okay, can we just do something unique and original for a change? And I think that's why, for example, Obsession has
mhm,
has done so well, because it was low budget movie that was completely original and unique and also just excellent. But that's part of why it can break through. And I'm hoping that things like that start to happen more and more, especially with this sort of creator economy that's sort of emerging now, where you can just put something on YouTube or you can just
Mhm.
make something on an iPhone and it looks pretty good. And so the ability to do that hopefully is going to allow for more creativity around like unique individual projects as opposed to just like rebooting time and time again. And I think part of why you're so impressive is because you managed to get one through. You got Goldie's Oldies,
I
which was an
did.
original show that you created, and that actually got made. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super, super proud of that show. That for the audience, it was a single a single camera, multi-generational family comedy about this 14-year-old girl, Goldie. Her mom is newly single, and she convinces her mom to move her and her brother from North America to London in the UK, where her grandfather lives. And she's like, well, he's got a big old house and we need a home. And, why don't we go and live with Gramps? Fresh stuff for everybody. And her mom's like, you know what? Yeah, let's go. And so they do. They show up on the doorstep. The grandfather's like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you're here. Nothing, could fill my heart with more warmth. Come on in, make yourself at home. Also, have you met my three other senior citizen roommates? And so it's it was Full House and Golden Girls, but from like a tween perspective, young teen perspective, and it was delightful because you've got kids who want to grow up, you've got older people who are kind of having a second childhood, and they're all living together, and it was wonderful. Yeah,
That's
we
so
did that for Nickelodeon International.
Yeah, that's so cool. And it's such a great idea. And we're coming kind of full circle here because we talked a little about the premise of show running. And this was
Hmm.
a project that you actually got to show run. So I'm curious, what was your experience like as a showrunner on this show? And
Uh,
oh, sorry,
very, very different. Yeah.
yeah, and like how does it compare to just being like a run and gun freelance writer on other shows? And like I don't know, maybe paint me a picture of like what it was like for you as a showrunner in those early days of like pre-production, and then once production started rolling, and then what was your role in post-production as well? Like just curious about the whole
Yeah.
sort of scope of the role.
So everything was a lot different on this show than it probably typically would have been, and it's for a number of reasons. So the first is that we were shooting it in the UK, and so we were shooting in this little town called Warrington, which is halfway between Manchester and Liverpool. Um, and the UK, so first, the UK doesn't really have a showrunner system on the particularly on the kids side. So they have what are called series producers, and the directors have a tremendous amount of power. Even episodic directors have a tremendous amount of power. Um, and so I had a great series producer, and we had our stable of directors, the four directors that we're going to be using. And so I was there for the writing rooms, and I was also a writer on the show. I was there on set when we were shooting the pilot episode, the first episode, and I was back and forth because we went to camera, I want to say November 2019. So yeah, so you can kind of maybe see where this is going. So I was back and forth to England, basically once a month, once every 6 weeks, and I'd be there for, a week and a bit. And when I wasn't there, I trusted my team, to be sending me stuff on our dedicated Skype channel or whatever it was then. I think before Slack was really big. Um, and the last time that I was in the UK was March 1st, 2020, expecting to be back 3 weeks later. And then I wasn't back 3 weeks later. We were halfway through our sixth episode when the pandemic shut everything down. Um, and I have to say that Viacom Studios, who was our production company, and Nickelodeon International were extraordinary partners because they said, we committed to 20 episodes. We're going to do 20 episodes. Let's go through all the scripts. Let's see which ones we could reasonably still shoot, which ones we can't. There were six that were just like, we can't. They were like, let's put these aside for season two. Here's money for six new episodes
Wow.
to write. Um, let's do it. So myself and the head writer Mark Oswin and a couple of our favorite writers on the show really dug down into it with the parameters of this has to be only about the family. It has to happen only in the house. It had like all of those kinds of things, and they really ended up becoming some of our best episodes because we had to dig so much down into, like, really dig down into character. And at that point, we were really starting to understand it. So we had and could understand what people could do. We shot six episodes, so we knew like, okay, well, this person is really good with physical comedy, and this person, don't give them long chunks of dialogue, but they're really good with a zinger, like all of those kinds of things. And we actually went back to camera in August of 2020. We were the first production in the UK back to camera under the COVID guidelines. I think Mission Impossible was number two. So, I don't know, Tom Cruise, send me a cake, you know?
Yeah.
But I never went back. I couldn't go back. We were locked down. And so I changed my whole life so that I was living in Toronto on British time. And so waking up at 3, 4 in the morning, so to be available for anything that came up on set, watching all of the dailies, all of those kinds of things. The dailies, for those people who don't know, are everything that was shot that day, the daily film. And so, going through and looking at that, and I was really, really lucky to have a phenomenal executive at Nickelodeon International. Her name is Charlie Valentine, and she really handled a lot of the post. I gave notes at every level of post production on the edits and things like that, but she was there in person at the color corrects and in person at the sound mixes and things like that, and she was absolutely incredible. Yeah, I was just in London for the first time since 2020, 2 weeks ago, and I got to hang out with Charlie twice, which was great because she's amazing. One of the best executives I've ever worked with.
That's awesome. It's too
So,
bad that your experience got sort of tainted by that. I mean, so many of us had issues during that time, but it's still a really cool achievement, and I think you should be really proud.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, it was a very different kind of show running. Much more like an executive than what I would call a proper showrunner, at that point because of all of that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things you mentioned earlier as well is this, and that ties into Goldies, is this idea of jokes and comedy in these kids' shows. I'm curious, like, do you think that comedy is something that you can teach to writers? Is it just that you have to be a funny person to get, like, everyone thinks they're funny, but like not everyone can write funny dialogue or funny action or funny situations. Like, is it something that you learn, or is it innate? Like, how do you approach like a comedy scene?
Um, it's a really good question. So, and there's a fair amount to unpack there. So, can you teach comedy? I think you can. I think that there is a structure to comedy, because it is about surprise, right? Uh, it is about playing against expectation. You set something up and then you undercut it, and so there are rules to comedy, and people talk about like the rule of three, right? Like you do two things, and then like rando. Oh, turn on reactions, turn off reactions. I'm sorry. I think things were
You're
just
good.
popping up on my screen.
No, you're good.
Um, and and that's because you're establishing a pattern and then you're undercutting that pattern. So those are things that you can learn. And as you work as a writer, you start learning how to tell jokes in particular people's voices. And there are certain jokes that certain people or certain characters would not make. It's just not the way that they would do something or say something, or it's not the way that they approach the world. Um, so you start learning all of those kinds of things. And I didn't think that I was that much of a comedy guy when I started. I was like, I'm the structure guy, that's what I'm good at. And you know now people are like, well, you're a comedy guy, that's what you win awards for. And it's like, I guess I'm a comedy guy.
Right.
And I like write and I like writing jokes now. I did
Well,
not before. Like, it was
well,
scary.
it's still scary to me, but
Mhm.
it's also fun because once you've built up that sort of spidey sense of like what a
Mhm.
joke sort of it, like you can kind of follow that a little bit, and that's something that I built a bit of a foundation of,
Mhm.
like when I did stand up. So I started to learn just like structurally what a joke is, but then when you go to do it on the page, it's a very different thing.
Yeah, it is.
And so I had to learn to adapt to that, and now I sort of get. I mean, I'm not. There's always room for growth, but I think that like I can understand how to construct a joke, and I think that you can build a world that is cohesive with jokes. Like for Goldie's a perfect example because
Mm.
you're juxtaposing old
Yes,
people with very young people, and so immediately that juxtaposition is right for comedy because these two people see things in very different ways, they think about things in different ways, they say things in different ways, and the contrast and juxtaposition is like fertile ground for comedy. So I would imagine that that's like a much not easier, but like it makes writing the jokes happen a little more nicely than I guess than if you had just sort of a I don't know, like a standard sitcom. Like there's always in a sitcom the weird guy, the
hmm
dumb guy. Like you're building an environment where jokes can live.
can happen. Yeah,
Yes.
you are building a joke incubator
Right.
because you want people to bounce off of each other. In drama, it comes from conflict. In comedy, it also comes from conflict, but it's usually like in a funny way. Also, people falling down is almost always funny.
It's true.
It's so true. It's just it is. And there's a book that came out recently, that I quite enjoyed. It's by Elliot Callan. It's called Joke Farming, and he started as like an intern at The Daily Show and ended as the head writer of The Daily Show under Jon Stewart. And like now is running the animated Ghostbusters series for Netflix. So, somebody I want to meet someday. He's a couple of years younger than me, which really, really tweaks me a little bit. But
Fair enough.
yeah, but he wrote this book called Joke Farming, and it was about like how to be funny on cue. right? And like when writing jokes is your job, when you cannot wait for the the muse of hilarity to
Mhm.
visit you, when you have to just churn out jokes on a daily basis, and they have to be funny and they have to hit, and what works and where's the premise and how do you make something funny. It's a really solid primer. I like the book a lot, and it's a funny book because it's about jokes.
I'll have to check it out. Yeah, it sounds interesting. I've read a couple of like when I was doing stand up, I read some like here's how to do a joke books. And
Mhm.
I also read like I was a big George Carlin and am a
Yeah.
big George Carlin fan. And so like watching him perform a joke, but then also reading his books where he just had
Hmm.
his sort of, I think he calls them brain droppings of
Hmm.
just like kind of one-liners and like just silly musings even that are like half a joke and just seeing the thought process behind some of that stuff was really interesting. And there like there's some obvious things like the rule of three, like you mentioned, or
Hmm.
juxtaposition of certain things, or like callbacks, which is like if you
Hmm.
have you have like a moment and then some time goes by and then you call back to whatever that moment was, either whether it's a joke or just a standout moment that can often be a good joke both on the page and just in real life. But yeah, so there's structure to jokes, but there's also like some there's some intangible quality to it
Yeah.
too, where it's like you
Yeah.
can't quite teach how to be funny. I don't think
Yeah. No, I don't think you can
fully.
teach how to be funny, but you can teach people. Uh, you can you can learn to be funny, but there is an innate humor. Maybe it's you can't teach people how to be innately humorous, but you can teach people how to
Write a
ultimately
joke.
write a joke.
Yeah, I think so,
Yeah,
it's some middle
you know?
ground of that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because some people are just funny.
Right.
Like, I mean, straight up, some people are just hilarious. Although some of the funniest people I know
Can't write a
cannot be
joke.
funny can't write a joke,
Yeah, totally.
right? And it's they're two very, very different skills, which is kind of amazing. But also one of the reasons why those people are so funny is because they are so secure in their own comedic voice,
Right.
right? And as writers, we have to take on the comedic voice of all of these different characters and then do it for a different show where the humor tone is different, and then do it for a different show where the humor tone is different. And then this goes through the directors, it goes through the actors, like, and you bring so so much to it. I mean, you think of like Chandler and Friends, and like Matt Perry being like, can you be any more or something, and it's just like that becoming such a, like, on paper, you know, could it be any more sarcastic? Doesn't look funny. But, you know, could I be any more sarcastic? On screen, with that real stage presence and charisma and all of that just star power behind it, and that being, his comedic voice, and it just really, exploding and being hilarious, or like catchphrases, a well-timed bazinga,
Right.
is right. It's like bazinga on its own is not funny.
Well, here's where I'll push a
Okay,
little bit
funny
back.
words. All right,
It's a
okay, funny
funny word.
words.
It is a
Yeah,
funny
bazinga
word.
is a funny word. Yes,
But
you're
it's
right.
like the example it reminds me of like hello Newman from Seinfeld. Like it's the way that
Yes,
they say like hello Newman in the script isn't a
yes.
funny line, but hello Newman or whatever. However he
Hmm.
does it, it's like it became so iconic that a non-funny line became funny just because you sort of anticipated it maybe, or I'm not sure what the science behind that is, but it's undeniably funny.
Exactly, exactly. No soup for you becomes hilarious.
There you go.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Serenity Now, also hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, we could go on and on.
Yeah.
But Evan, I don't want to keep you too long because I know you're a busy guy and you have to go. But I do want to just touch on this because we're in this new world of AI now,
Hmm.
and I'm curious your take because we were both on the animation committee, and this came up a little
Yes.
bit,
Hmm.
especially with some of the writer strikes that had happened previously or potential strikes that had
Yeah,
happened.
almost happened here, didn't, but yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
And then in the States, I believe there was some talk about AI when that strike did happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so I'm just curious your take. Like, it seems like AI is here to stay. It seems like the consensus of most of the people I've spoken to has been it is a tool. It is something that isn't going to replace necessarily writers, but it is a tool that writers can use. It is a tool that producers will use to put on writer hats and call themselves writers.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, sort of where do you land in this minefield of AI? Like, what is your hot take?
Yeah, my hot take, I mean, I do think that it is a tool that is probably not going anywhere. I'm not a huge fan of it. Um, that might be my own sort of Luddite kind of like you will not replace me with a machine kind of kind of thing. I think ultimately though, it's sort of what we're talking about earlier about IP and it being the safe thing for shareholders and that anything almost all IP stuff ends up being this document of consensus. All AI is the most mid thing ever. It is the average, literally the weighted average of what you're asking it to do. Now, that can be amazing for some people because you know, it's one of those things where it's like a lot of people think that they can write, but they can't. They're literate, but they're not writers. It's just like people who drive are like, I could totally drive NASCAR. No, you can't. You know, I love cooking. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love cooking in my kitchen. I have worked in the service industry. I have done like prep cooking and things like that in a kitchen. I am not a chef. I'm a good amateur cook, but I am not a chef. And that's one of those things, it's like people can read and people can write, so they think that they can be writers. And guess what? No, like I can draw a building, but I'm not an architect. I
Well,
haven't put in, my 10,000 hours on that.
well, you're ahead of me because I probably can't even draw a building. I'm terrible at art, but
Yeah, oh, dude, I am too. But I can use graph paper. I
never
took drafting class in grade seven.
never play
Therefore,
Pictionary with me. I'll tell you that right now.
but the most mid thing is great for most people when they are trying to bang out something mid. Our job, what we do as craftspeople, sometimes even as artists, but mostly as craftspeople, and I love being a craftsperson. Uh, that that's what we do. We make good things. We are craftspeople. People are like, make me a great shelf, and we're like, here is an amazing shelf. Do you want the curly cues on it? And they're like, no, I don't like curly cues. And you're like, cool, I will sand those off right now, and I will make them the jagged little points that you want them to be. Are you happy with that shelf? They're like, that's a great shelf. And like, great, because I've got 4 more shelves to do for other people. But that shelf is going to hold all your books and it won't fall down. And isn't that great? And that's awesome. And AI is going to make, you know, AI makes like kind of crappy IKEA furniture, not even the good IKEA stuff. Like, you know, like the real,
The real
like,
obscure IKEA back catalog IKEA stuff.
Not just like the really cheap stuff that's like where the particle board is too thin, and if you put too many things on it, it's going to snap. Like,
Right.
that's AI. Like, yeah, that I just I just like working with people, man. I like, if you're working in isolation and, an AI is the only thing that you have to bounce ideas off of, maybe that's helpful for you. I've got friends who are not writers, but like doing creative things. We swear by it. And isn't that great for them? But they haven't spent the last 10, 15 years of their lives doing what we do and working in writing rooms and having friends who you could be like, hey, can I bounce something off you? And are going to get the best cool idea. They're like, oh, wow, that's great. What if this too? And like, oh my God, I hadn't thought of that. Oh man. And those are writer brains doing writing things. And that's the world I like living in. AI can, I don't know, do complex calculus for me if it wants to let me know the volume of how much ice cream is left from if I stick it down into the cone, how much ice cream is in this part and how much ice cream is in this part. AI could do that for me, you
Well,
know?
now I want to know the answer. So we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna do
All
a
right.
field trip and find that out.
Exactly.
Well, Evan,
But
thank you so much for being here. I think I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really cool to just dig into your history and learn more about writing and producing and the process and everything that you talked about. So thank you so much for that.
oh, it's been a pleasure, man.
I like to end the podcast, as you know, by asking about a time you stepped outside your comfort zone and how that shaped your life. I can already imagine several that have come up in this conversation, but I
There have
wonder
been a
if,
few that have come up.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder if one sticks out in particular for you.
I mean, there are two that stick out a lot. Becoming a dad uh, definitely
Big
put
one.
me out of my comfort zone, and it is the greatest thing ever. Like I really love being a dad, and I've got a great kid, so he's pretty cool. We have fun. He plays D&D. I play D&D. We play video games together. He's great.
That's awesome.
Um, so yeah, so that I think is the biggest one because oh my God, was it ever scary and still is every day scary. And he is always pushing me out of my comfort zone. Um, and probably will always, because kids. Um, yeah, so that. And the other one is uh writing a novel. Um, Myself and my creative partner, Amy, we just handed in the first draft of our YA novel to our editors, the publishing house, on Monday.
Wow.
And, you know, writing a book, whoa, that's way out of the comfort zone, my dude.
Well,
But,
congratulations. That's really
one foot in
exciting.
front of the other. And suddenly suddenly after 6 or 7 months you've got a 31 chapter book that is at the editors. So
That's incredible.
yeah.
Are you allowed to tell us, just because I like to, give my guests a chance to plug anything they
Yeah.
want. Are you allowed to tell us the name of the book or
Yeah.
any info
Yeah,
about it?
absolutely. So the name of the book is Happily Ever After the Apocalypse. It is a rom-com road trip, enemies to lovers story through 18 months after the AI apocalypse on a trip from Ottawa to Toronto. And it is an upper YA book. Um, it's going to be published on the Viking imprint of Penguin Random House in the fall of 2027. And yeah, first novel, man.
That's so cool.
Crazy.
Congratulations. I will
Thank
definitely
you.
keep an eye out for it. And when it does come out, ping me and I'll put a link in the description so that if
Oh my
anyone wants to
gosh.
find it, they can find it right there. So Evan, thank you so much, man. It's been great talking with you.
It's been great talking with you too, Mike. And everybody out there, please don't forget to like and subscribe.
My man, thank you so
Right?
much.